Are you thinking about selling your business? If you are, you're going to have to go out and get a valuation on your business. And there are a million things that go into that valuation, which seem like voodoo to the lay person. So today we're going to learn what a valuation is, what goes into those valuations, and what the most common mistakes business owners make when they think about the value of their business. Welcome to episode 41 of the KeyHire Small Business Podcast, where we cover issues that help owners scale their small business. I'm Corey Harlock, creator of KeyHire Solutions, and I'll be your host. Today, our guest is Len Bruskiewitz. He's a FocalPoint business coach and exit planning advisor. Couple interesting facts about Len. Prior to being a coach, he's helped, everything he's done has been around helping small businesses be successful. He's worked for companies like Intuit, Constant Contact, maybe you heard of them, Grasshopper, Fisherman. His favorite sports are ice hockey and pickleball. Those are on, ice hockey's on the top of my list. Pickleball's on there as well. And he's a third generation small business owner. Both sets of his grandparents came from Poland and they started small businesses, and it's part of his genealogy, I guess. So Matt, let's bring on Len. How you doing, Len?
Great. Good to see you, Corey.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So we were just talking a little bit before we came on. You're a hockey fan, you're a Bruins fan. Rough year for you so far this year. You guys have been a little up and down.
Absolutely. But part of it is expectations, right? They've been so good for so long that mediocrity feels bad.
So as a Calgary Flames fan, you have two of the guys we traded away in our house cleaning 1 or 2 years ago. You got Lindholm down the middle, who's underperforming, and then you have who's the big defenseman? His last name starts with a B.
Zadorov.
Zadorov, who is a train wreck.
Yeah, he's great at taking penalties. He leads the league in penalty minutes.
And he's really good at being out of position. Two of his strong points, being out of position and taking penalties. But every now and again, he rushes the puck, and you're like, holy crap, where'd that guy come from?
Yeah.
So we always like to start off with some definitions. Valuations are this weird kind of voodoo topic out there. The people in the investment banking world and private equity and all these high echelon niche exclusive businesses, that's part of their vernacular. But for the layperson, what are we talking about when we're talking about a valuation of a business?
Well, it's really, as simply put, it's what a potential buyer is willing to pay for your company, right? So that's what a valuation is. And the key piece is that you don't really set what the valuation is. You own some of the components, but really it's the market that decides what the value of your company is.
So we can't just pull a number out of the air and say I'm worth 10x my revenue?
No. There are a lot of golf course conversations that happen along those lines, and they're worth absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so let's kind of walk through, if you're okay with it, what are some of the high points about what's taken into consideration or valued when you're doing would devalue your company when you're looking at a valuation, kind of the top five or whatever they might be? Yeah,
let me start with just one step back and say how are companies valued, right? That may be interesting to you. I think for the most part, the companies that we're talking about, which we're talking about the smaller side of the market, $1 to $15 million in revenue kind of number. Typically, there are not enough of those sold with public valuations on them that you can really do a comparison, right? Like with a house, there are houses that sell around you have a pretty good idea.
Sure.
So the other methodologies are typically a multiple of revenue, which is not very common. The most common is a multiple of earnings.
Okay.
And to get into the nitty gritty, it's EBITDA, right? Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, right? So to keep it simple, I'm just going to talk about earnings, right? So typically, companies in this space are valued on a multiple of their earnings. All right. So now let me talk about how that valuation happens.
Sure.
And I'm going to throw out two percentages to you. The first is 20%. 20% of the value of a company is based on the factors that you can see externally. So, what's the state of the industry? What's the company's position in that industry? What's its reputation in the market? So, those are things you don't need to be inside to get
Right.
to get it. I think what's surprising though is that's such a small part. So that's about 20%. About 80% of the value of the company is really the intangibles. So these are the things on the inside, and they come into four big buckets. The first one is kind of structural, and it's, are your processes documented? You know, do you really understand the metrics that drive your business? So those are two big structural capitals that drive a lot of the value. Like, you know, and that why that's important is with a process from the process perspective, can somebody else come in and run the company?
Right. Yeah.
If not, the value is not very high, right? The next one is customer capital. So this is, how much diversification do you have within your customers? So do you get 90% of your revenue from only 3 of your 100 customers?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really risky because if one of those customers goes away, your business takes a huge hit.
Right.
So you want to have
your business could go away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second component to that customer piece is, how is your revenue generated? Is it one time? And so every time you want a new customer, you've got to go find one? Or is the revenue recurring? So do you get money from your customers every month or every quarter?
Right.
Recurring revenue that's predictable is much more highly valued than the same revenue amount that has to be found and hunted every time, right? So
can I just ask a question? What about account management where you're developing and you get in selling one line, maybe a product to them, and then you're cross-selling and upselling different lines and products within them that might not be recurring?
Better than one-off, absolutely. So with that, I say that there are really 3 kinds of revenue. There's the one-off, there's repeatable, which is what you described, right?
Okay.
You know that if you have 100 customers, you can cross-sell, additional products to them.
You kind of get in with your good deal, and then once they see the value of it, you can have conversations about, well, we can also do this, we can also do that type thing.
Yeah. And where that gets to be valuable is if you can predict that. So again, if you say, hey, for every $100 of revenue that we generate new, we know we're going to generate an additional $400 from that customer down the road, right?
Okay.
So repeatable, right? And versus recurring, which is every month, right? So
kind of
exactly, subscription
or whatever. Yeah.
The next 2 kinds of capital, I'm going to kind of lump them together. They're social and human, and this is really what's the culture of the company, right? Do people like being there? Does it have a great vibe, right? And again, this is tough to see from the outside, but do the people want to be there? Another component of this is the owner independent from the business or not? So if every decision has to go through the owner and all the knowledge is in the owner's head, that business is worth next to nothing, right? Because nobody else can come in and run it. And then the final piece to it is really the strength of the team within the company. Do they have specific know-how that nobody else has, right? That would be hard to replicate. If that's the case, then there's great value in that. So hopefully you can see how a lot of those components work together to drive. Did that surprise you? Does that kind of ratio surprise you?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I knew some of them were going to be more heavily weighted than other. I think the human equity piece of it, the experience and internal knowledge piece, and how it's documented and is more valuable than one person holding all the chips. That I knew, but I didn't realize how heavily weighted some of these things were over the others. I don't think a lot of people do, So, I mean, that's maybe a great segue to move into I'm a business owner. I got a $20 million a year of business. In my mind, it's worth 120. So what are the big mistakes a business owner could make? And maybe we'll preface it saying, my 1, 2, 3-year goal is to take it to market and see if I can turn it over and get some walkaway money. What are some of the mistakes you might make?
Yeah, I would say I'll rattle off a couple and then go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, great.
First biggest mistake is your accounting is a mess, right? So if your accounting is in bad shape, huge strike. The second one is going to be that owner independence that we just discussed, right? If the business can't run without the owner, that's going to be a huge issue. And the third one is one that you hinted at already, which is just a misalignment of value between what the market says and what the owner says. So a lot of other things kind of wrap into those, but those are the three biggest things that I see. And because especially that owner independence thing is where, if the company can't run without the owner, that's bad. And if the owner can't operate without the company, that's bad as well, right?
Yeah.
They're so entrenched in it that they can't see any other way forward than being a part of the company. Those are what kind of kill value, in my opinion.
And I know with the accounting, people think, well, how important is accounting? But these people that are coming in to value your company, they're going to do some forensic accounting. They're going to chase down all these things that they find curious or are missing, or it's hard to snow these guys. They know what they're looking for. They know where to look. They know what red flags look like. I'm a big believer in the little lie, big lie, right? If someone is in their books manipulating numbers in a way, they'll go in and they'll say, they're not just doing this over here, but maybe we got some stuff going on over. Oh, this is worse than we thought. In your experience, is bad accounting enough of a reason for people just say, yeah, we can't represent you, we can't sell your company?
Absolutely, and it's one of the reasons why, when you talk about exit planning, I think of it in terms of years and not months, right? I think that's another issue is business owner kind of gets to a point and says, I'm done with this. I want to sell the company now.
Right.
Not very realistic, especially if you do have, some inconsistencies in your accounting, because you can't wash those out in 3 months.
No.
You need a couple of years, typically 3 or 4 years, for those to wash themselves through. So
when you say wash yourself through, you mean to kind of go through the book so they're not showing up and raising red flags any longer?
Correct.
And here's a quick question for you. Do you think the team that's currently in place who's making those mistakes are the people to fix those books and get your books to a place where you're comfortable handing them over to someone doing a valuation?
It depends, right? So if it's, like, there are different kinds of mistakes. There are mistakes of omission where it's directed, do not record that. Those you don't want, and you don't want the people involved. If it's an honest mistake, like, I get that. And part of what can happen as you get ready to exit your business is sometimes the bookkeeper or the accountant that has served you well isn't the best one going forward, right? Because a lot of times another reason that you need some time is there are some huge tax advantages to structuring your company and setting your accounting in certain ways. For example, you can set up a trust that may save you millions of dollars in taxes. Again, it may take years for it to mature. So
right.
Sometimes the financial planners, the accountants, even the lawyers that you're using today might not be the best ones going forward. And that's where you need to say, we need to fix this now.
And in my experience in kind of helping business owners grow and move forward, not that we're doing valuations, but we're assessing to see, do we have the skills and the capacity in-house to get us there? And sometimes it's that bookkeeper that's been with you 20 years and they've been doing things a certain way, but the business has gone from 5 million to 20, and they might be, the requirements of that job may have surpassed their experience or capabilities. And so they're doing things not kind of intentionally, but some of their practices might not be in line with the size of the business or the aspirational growth of that business, right? And they're not scalable to do correctly. And so that's why I asked the question, because they'll say, well, I'll just get so-and-so to do that. And you're in your head, you're thinking, they're not capable. They might not even understand the concept, and not because they're a bad bookkeeper. It's because they've never done it before, because the scale of their work is really kind of mom and pop shop. And we're kind of growing past that, we're crossing that chasm, so to speak.
Agree. And it gets back to one of the other points I made prior, where you really need to understand what drives your business. And again, sometimes bookkeepers are looking in the rear view and not really looking ahead. And so, you just may need some different skill sets to be able to really, so that, and you hit on a great point, that when a company comes in to do due diligence, a potential buyer of your company, you can't really tell them where to stop, right? If they're going to write a big check, they can ask a lot of questions.
Right.
And so one of the things that I work with clients on, and I'm sure you do the same, is let's get ahead of that, right? Maybe we can't fix this problem today, but we're going to acknowledge it. We're going to say, yes, it's a wart. Here's how we're fixing it.
Right.
Rather than being surprised.
Yeah. In my world, we do that a lot with reputation. If someone maybe had a bad manager, or even the owner was not a great leader in the past, that's great. Let's address it, because now we can tell the story of that. You're right. Because people say, well, I heard bad things, but you're 100% right. They used to be horrible. But let me tell you what's happened over the last 12, 18, 24 months that is really encouraging, and will show to you they understood they made some mistakes, and they're doing really hard work to correct that.
It diffuses the situation, right? It's no longer a bomb because you admit it.
Yeah, it's out there, and then you're showing, we understand we got a wart there, and here's what we're doing to correct it. Actually, I think it puts you in a better light. Like, you have some humility. We made a mistake, and we're taking it seriously, and we're fixing it. I'm exactly. Brain. What was the second mistake you said? I know what number 3 was. What you said? Accounting. Number 2 was
the owner independence, right? The kind of that the company can't run without.
Right. And so what I understand that to be is, if the owner is the business, if people don't have access to all of the information and knowledge, and aren't empowered to make decisions for their department, if the owner is in every leadership seat for every department in the business, that's probably not a good starting position.
Not at all. Not at all. Right. So that is and that's hard to hide, right? Because again, once due diligence starts, the potential buyers will interview the employees, and they'll say, how does your process work? And if they say, well, we asked the boss, that's not good, right? If everything is we ask the boss.
If the boss gets hit by a bus, the business ceases to exist.
Right, exactly.
And so when you do a valuation, and you're in a situation like that, where we have an owner who, when you start, and I say this all the time, and I truly believe it to be true, when you start a small business, you hire your neighbor, you hire your neighbor's cousin, you hire your buddy, and everyone pitches in and does whatever they have to do to drive that business to be successful. And that is absolutely the right way to start a business, unless you're VC backed or something, right? Eventually that business will grow, and the requirements and demands of the business will be more than the talent of the individuals that kind of got it where it is. And because everyone's doing everything, we're not aligned. We don't have a management team. We don't have the experience we need, all of that. Long way around to ask, is it ever happen in your valuation process, you say to a business owner, you need to beef up your leadership team?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gets to the point where again, if depending on what option a business owner is considering, and if they're considering, selling to a third party where they're no longer going to be there, they have to build up this management capability to be able to run the business when they're gone, because the new people coming in aren't going to know everything immediately. The old owner is gone in this scenario. So there has to be that second level that can carry the load. And look, that's not a bad thing, right? The management level gets more responsibility. They grow, they're more fulfilled. So it's good all around. But absolutely, when I come into a situation where it's owner and all worker bees, it's very disconcerting, because it tells you that there's no resiliency in this organization, not for work, but for decision making.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. And it just struck me, you said with the accounting, it's a long tail. It's going to take a while for all those practices to wash out and kind of prove to a potential buyer that it's taken care of. It's not a 3-month process. And I'm assuming you can go out and hire all these high-powered leadership people, and someone comes in to value your business and say, how long you been here? Oh, it's my second week. Oh, I've been here a month. And that's not it either. I think you need to probably put these people in place. As an owner, it's a hard learning curve to get that humility to say, I built this. I've had my fingerprints are all over this business, but now I brought in people who, once they get up and running, are better at this than me at running their department and turning that over and fighting the urge to micromanage them. It's a big learning for an owner. And then you have to show that they can run the business. I have one consultant I work with, and they say the acid test is if the owner can take a month-long vacation and his phone doesn't ring one time. That's when you've crossed that point of you have capable leadership. They can run the business.
That's perfect. Yeah. And part of my, not really a pitch, but part of my value to a business owner is to say, think about what it would be like for you to go away for a weekend and not have to look at your phone. Yeah. Think about taking a week of vacation without having to check in with the office. What would that feel like to you, right? Yeah. So there are benefits to the owner as well. Them working less, potentially making more money because they're focused on the right things, are all positives to this, and leads them on this path where they can then ride off into the sunset. So I want to run something by you.
Sure.
Because I have a theory here, and it goes along with what you were talking about bringing other people on to do the things that you used to do yourself. My stat is, if somebody can do something 70 or 80% as good as you just need to let them do it and move on. What do you think of that?
I like it. 80 is always my number. We call them 80%ers. So I think that's what it is. I love that. And I think there's a few points to throw in there. We bring in leaders, highly experienced leaders into businesses. We always talk about, you have to build the trust. And that goes both ways. That owner has to develop a trust in you, and you have to earn that owner's trust before you can start breaking things. And then the conversation with the owner is, they probably know how to run operations better than you. They're coming from a big company. They have a lot of training. They understand this. They're going to do things differently than you're used to. And once they earn your trust, you have to trust them in return to go out and make good decisions to improve your business. And it's going to be hard. There's a lot of, you talked about that, not looking at your phone for a weekend. Man, there's a ton of learned behaviors in there that they have to break. It's habit. It could be 10, 15, 20 years of habits of going in and taking over and walking the floor and pulling people aside. And you bring in these leaders, and we're creating chain of command and span of control and all whatever fancy term you want to put on it. But we're creating a pecking order where information up, information down, and you can't circumvent that and just start going to people, because you're going to undermine that leader, and that's not how you develop trust.
Agreed. So I see it in two lights. One way to do this for an owner is if it's a process, right? Then it's literally they need to do, this is not optimal, but if there's something where it is this, then they need to create the checklist and then just ensure that this is probably a lower level task, that the person who is hired to do that task follows those steps, right?
Yeah.
So there's maybe a little bit more oversight. But when we're talking about what you were just discussing, if you hire somebody in where what you really care about is the result and not the steps, then you have to be able to say, this is the result I want.
Yeah.
You're going to do it likely different than I did. All I'm going to judge you on is the result, not how you got there. And that's where that trust, you have to build that trust.
I like that. And I always call that end result management. Don't manage the silly example I give all the time is if you give someone a broom and say, you have 60 minutes to sweep out the warehouse. And you go in there after 30 minutes and they're 75% done and you say, you're doing it wrong. Here's how you're supposed to sweep it. You're like, well, no, they're actually probably more efficient than your way, but because they're not doing it your way, you interpret that as they're not doing it correctly, and you have to be open to that, right? Yeah, okay, so that's cool. And then we have the third mistake is the owner's romantic valuation of the business.
Yeah, I think it's worth this, whereas the market says it's worth this.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the only way to bring those points closer together is focus on the stuff we've already been talking about.
Right. So there is, getting a professional valuation of your business helps, but it's not fun for me typically to deliver those results because it normally ends up like this. The piece to it is, again, assuming that your timeline is years and not months, we can close that gap. Right. Here are the things we're going to do to close that gap. You're going to hire people that are better at doing these things than you are. You're going to step back and focus on the big picture. That's how we're going to close that gap, right? So it's a tough thing to deliver, but there is hope, right? This is what we do. We close the gap.
But Len, my business is super unique, and there's no one else around like me. It's got to be worth more.
Unlikely, right? Unlikely.
So,
could it happen? Yes.
So we hear a lot about these companies that sell for huge multiples in hot markets, right? But let's put that in perspective, because everyone, I think human nature is to say, yeah, but that's not me. Like, I'm not one of those low value companies. I think we do things pretty good around here. So from your experience, just so people listening can understand that, what percentage of companies do you value higher than the owner thinks it is, right where the owner thinks it is, and lower than where the owner thinks it is?
I'm going to make this pretty simple. It tends to be 90% lower, right? Okay. And then 8% about on where people have a decent self-awareness, and there are surprises, right? Every once in a while, what you've done is exactly what you should have been doing, right? And so that does happen. It just tends to not be very often.
And the reason I asked that question is for people listening, I want them to hear you say it's 2% of the business are really those home runs where you might have an owner who's underestimating his value and it's over. I think you said 1 in 10 are. So if you take on target and over target, it's 1 in 10 businesses, 1 in 10 business owners are valuing their business either on target or under target. And 9 out of 10 of them are overvaluing their business.
Right. And I get it. You sure. Blood, sweat, and tears for 20 years. You ascribe value to that. And the problem is others don't.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to, I just want people who might be listening to this to maybe have a moment where they go, okay, maybe I need to prepare myself or look at this a little different. Maybe I'm not worth 12x. Maybe, once you come in and you say, actually, we probably could get 6x for this business. And they go, yeah, okay, now I'm starting to understand this process and removing my emotion and my time and blood, sweat, and tears from it, and just looking at what is someone actually buying. Maybe that makes sense. Ideally, and I'm sure you would love it if they all got more than they thought they would get because they worked their asses off to get there. But I think what we've emphasized is the importance of putting process in place, putting the right people in place, not skimping on your accountants. I know they're a cost center, but good accountants are worth every penny you pay them, because they're going to find stuff that'll save you money, but long term, they could be helping your value of your company, helping it grow.
Yeah, and I think the biggest piece to that is finding an accountant that helps you understand not just what happened, but helping you develop predictors of what will happen, right? Leading indicators rather than.
And those are pretty senior and sophisticated people. Like we're not getting we're not getting an $80,000 bookkeeper who's going to be able to do that for you. $80,000 bookkeepers are great in their role, but what you're talking about is that blend of tactical and strategic vision. We're getting into a pretty experienced controller, if not someone who's getting into a director of finance or a VP of finance or something like that. Like these are seasoned people who know their shit.
Right, and you may get that talent differently, right? So you may because you may not want to pay a super senior person for something that's more of a episodic or a one time, right? So if you can get somebody to come in and help figuring out what those KPIs are, then a lower level person can deliver the data
right.
to support those.
I think what you're talking about is maybe a fractional CFO or something like that, or a controller, fractional, just kind of come in and focus on building the process, the procedure, and the value, and then you have someone at a lower level, lower dollar value doing that day-to-day tactical work.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's move into the recommendations. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So what are your top 2, 3, 5 pieces of advice you'd give to a business owner who's thinking about, maybe it's time to sell? What walk us through your top pieces of advice.
Great. So the first thing I'll say is it can sound daunting, and you don't have to do it all at once. But what I would encourage business owners out there to do is to at least start. And I'm going to give you 4 areas to focus on with a little bit of detail beneath them. The first one is the personal world, the personal realm. So what you want to do as a business owner is figure out what's next. What is your next great adventure? Is that starting another business? Is that retiring? Is that creating a nonprofit? Whatever it be, you need to have a goal of what you want to do after. What that helps you do is get that separation from your current business, right?
Yep.
So define your next adventure and discuss that with your family. Discuss what your plans are, especially if you are thinking that you're going to have a succession plan, that your kids or relatives are going to take it over. You need to have lots of conversations around that. And then start to build your advisory team. So we've talked about some of them: accountants, lawyers, financial planners, estate planners, business coaches, maybe a life coach. Those are the people, insurance agents. Those are the people who are going to help you build this plan, because it's not just your business; it's your personal life and your personal financial life as well. So personal is the first thing, right? Or it's one of the big components. The second is on the business side. Focus, focus, focus. Focus on what you do best. Start to shed those customers or those businesses that really aren't doing a lot for you. Remember, most businesses are based on earnings growth, not on revenue growth. So people don't care as much about revenue. They want to see earnings that are growing. Okay. Minimize risks to the business. Get rid of those, deal with any lawsuits, any employees, those kinds of things. Deal with those now. Again, the farther behind, the easier it is to explain. And then work on how you're going to grow, because that's what buyers care about. They want to see growth. Next group, we've talked a lot about this process, accounting stuff. Get your books in order, understand your metrics, document your processes, start tax planning. So, you can structure exits so that they have minimal tax impact, or if you don't, that can have maximum tax
You
impact.
get a nice big payout, and then you give a big chunk of it right back.
Exactly. And then the fourth area is what we've spent a good bit of time around, is developing your management structure. So getting independence, right? So that you're not making every decision, and letting that next group of people step up and take responsibility. You're going to get buy-in from them. You're going to have less stress. So these are really the four big areas. So personal, business strategy, the process, and the management side. That's what I would encourage people to start doing today to get ready. The whole goal here is leave on your terms and on your timeline. Don't let it be somebody else's decision.
And the timeline has to be a long one. I mean, to do all the things that you talked about, it's a 24-month, 36-month investment minimum, right?
Yeah, I like to think about 3 years minimum. Can you do it quicker? Yes. Will you get the same outcome? Unclear. But yeah, think of a 3-year timeline.
I think what I heard is, if it's in your mind, start building your foundation now to make this happen, because the smoother your operation is running, and the more freedom you have from your business, and more you're set up to sell that business personally, professionally, the easier the transition is going to be.
Absolutely. I'll use one kind of example. So let's say I've run a decent business, but I haven't done any of those things you talked about, or I talked about. Somebody knocks on the door and says, "Hey, I want to buy your business." What are you going to say? Yeah, come back in 2 years, right? Because my accounting's a mess. Or you do these things that I talked about. You get ready. Somebody walks in and says, "Hey, I want to buy this business." You say, "Great, let's start," right? Because it's always, and the idea of it being 3 years means it's ready,
right?
For any point after. Once it's ready, it's easy to maintain, but it's the getting ready that's hard.
And what I was thinking is, you're talking is the ROI on that. If you're not ready and someone says, "I want to buy your business," they might give you 1.5, 2.5x your business. But if you take 36 months and do all of the things you said, now you might get 6, 8, 10x multiple on that business. And I mean, would you rather walk away, if your earnings are $1 million, would you rather walk away with $2 million payout or a $10 million payout? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, and there are actually two leverage points that you hit on. One of them. The other one is, as you do these things, your core business is going to be more profitable. So it's not even just multiples higher; it's that it's a higher multiple on a higher
revenue number. Yeah, and it's really easy to say. It's really hard to do. I appreciate that. So, Len, if people are listening to this thinking, "Man, I'd really like to talk to this guy and pick his brain and see if he can get me on the right track," how can we reach you?
Yeah, the best way is to go to my website, which is greaterheightscoaching.com, right up there on the screen. Up in the right-hand corner, I have a business valuation calculator.
Oh, cool.
It's free. Takes you about 15 minutes to go through.
Okay.
It's going to ask you for 3 pieces of information. The first is your last 12 months revenue, your last 12 months earnings, net income, and then what industry you're in. Based on that, and then you're going to take about 10 minutes and answer about 15 questions. And what those questions are going to do is to gauge your readiness.
Okay.
So it's a lot along the lines of what we talked about, right?
Awesome.
And at the end result of that, you're going to get a quick valuation of what your business is worth today, as well as some suggestions on how to improve it. So those 15 questions yield, this is hurting your value. If you were to fix this, your value would increase by $10. Right. So it's a real quick 15 minutes. It's free. It just gives you a decent sense. Is it perfect? No, but it's a great place to start.
Very cool. It'll give you enough to have you go, hey, well, I'm worth more than that. And it'll tell you, now we just told you how to get the value, what you think you're worth, right?
Exactly.
Very cool. Is there any other way we can reach out to you, or is that the one?
From there, you can set up a time to talk to me. My phone number's on there, my email's on there. So that's the best way. That'll make it simple rather than spelling my last name, which is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, no joke. You might. We've had a couple of tricky names on here, so that's all right, though. I appreciate it. Hey, man, I appreciate your time. This has been super valuable. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, my pleasure. All right, I'm going to take a run at his last name again. That's Len Bruskiewitz. And that was a great conversation, some really good information. And I'd like to thank you for tuning into the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. If you got value out of our episode today and you want to keep up to date on our new content, make sure you leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode, or subscribe here to the YouTube channel. We take comments really seriously. We want to give you content that is that you would find interesting and important. So let us know. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, whatever your favorite platform is to listen to podcasts. Just search up the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Corey Harlock. And until next time, stop grinding, start growing.